What's going on, guys? This is John here with the Fantasy Tap, and I just wanted to say thank you for joining me on today's episode. As we know, we are doing our round-by-round breakdowns. This is going to be round 3. I'll be going through picks 25 through 36 and a half-point PPR ADPs, letting you know what I think of each player going at each pick. If you have missed our rounds 1 and 2, stop the video now and go pick up those videos and see where me in the round 1 and Mike in round 2 feel that everyone should be going and what we think about them. Now, before we get started, I do just want to remind everyone, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like the video as well as subscribing to the channel. Bring us a little love, and then hit that little bell icon if you want to make sure you're not missing any videos coming out in the future. And if you are listening to this on the podcast, make sure you are leaving us a rate and review. Let us know what you think of the show and how much you love us, and thank you for that. Now, if you guys remember from last season, we do an annual listener league. Last year, giving away a signed Tyreek Hill helmet. This year, we are going to be doing it again, giving away a signed Kyler Murray, beautiful all-white helmet with a nice, beautiful Cardinals logo on it. The signature looks great. So if you guys want a chance to win that, you will have to be the winner of the Listener League. And to get a spot there, you need to first be subscribed to our YouTube channel, as well as sending us a little DM saying you're interested and letting us know that you are subscribed. And then if you guys want a second entry into the raffle to get that spot, make sure to join the Discord that is going to be down below. It's going to be a community where you guys can build teams, build leagues, get all the latest fantasy news, updates, and alerts, as well as meeting people, talking to them, get a rate your team section to see how well you've been drafting, what kind of trades you need to be making in the season, what kind of players you need to be targeting on those waivers early, as well as just regular talk. We've got some sports betting talk at the moment going on because of what's going on with Thursday night's game between the Steelers and the Cowboys, but we'll have to see what goes on with that. Now, let's get into the episode. Going number 25 off the board is going to be George Kittle, tight end number 3, finishing as tight end 2 in 2018 and tight end 3 in 2019. He's someone who obviously carries a lot of weight behind his name, and even though he comes off of a banged-up year last year, finishing as tight end 18 in only 8 games, he's going still pretty early. Tight ends have made a huge comeback in fantasy. A lot of people grabbing them super early, especially these high-end guys, because of the amount of value that they bring to your team. But Kittle was kind of inconsistent last year, especially when Jimmy Garoppolo was at quarterback. He does see a high target volume, and he does have that big play opportunity because of the fact that he's such a mismatch between him and the linebackers that line up on him. He's going to be a big boomer bust tight end. But last season, when he did come back for week 16 and 17, he put up some big numbers, 16 and 17 points respectively in each game. And Jimmy Garoppolo was not at quarterback that week. Now, I do think that if Trey Lance comes into this season, Garoppolo is going to be a safety blanket for him. There's already reports coming out of camp that Garoppolo is making a really good connection with him so far and building their chemistry up already. Now, a lot of people are worried about the fact that the 49ers do have such a strong rushing game, as well as spending capital on Trey Sermon this year. And then this will be Kittle's first season with both Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel in the lineup. And how much opportunity does that leave for Kittle? And in my mind, that leaves a lot. But the problem is he's that high-end tight end. He's going to be inconsistent in your drafting room right now at the beginning of the 3rd round. If you're lucky enough to be at the end of the draft, maybe take him when he falls. I'm currently not going to be spending this high of a pick because I don't want the inconsistency. I do think he's going to have some games where he is the tight end one, and it is possible he finishes as a top 3 tight end this year. But the inconsistency is going to make me go for guys a little bit later in the draft who I think are going to have a higher floor, but obviously not have the same ceiling that he does. Going on to number 26, we've got Keenan Allen, one of my favorite receivers coming into this year, and it has a lot to do with the quarterback throwing on the ball. Justin Herbert came in last year and was an absolute stud, thrown for 350 yards, 300 yards like it was no problem. The guy's young and looks great. Now, there is a little bit of expected regression coming from him, but I don't think that's going to affect Keenan Allen too much. They don't have the greatest wide receiver skill set. The greatest wide receivers in the league right now. His number 2 being Mike Williams, who I'm getting a little bit hotter on. I'm liking him a little bit more and more. And then after that, there's a lot of guys who are still unproven and trying to make a name for themselves. So I do think that Keenan Allen's going to continue to see that role in that offense. And what that role brings you is about 10 targets and 9 catches in a game. The guy's highly targeted, getting over 100 targets the past 3 seasons and getting over 80 catches in the past 3 seasons. He's going to be getting you points week in and week out, finishing as wide receiver 12 or better between the years of 2017 and 2019. And those are years where he played all 16 games. And then last year, finishing as wide receiver 14, only playing in 13 games. And in that last game, he did leave the game after only 5 plays. So let's just call it 12 games. But what you get is someone that can put up those points very, very greatly. Just barely falling under 1,000 yards last season. He did have 3 games for 100 yards and only 8 touchdowns. I know that's not a stat you should be proud about, but with that finish that he was getting last year and has been getting the years before without having such a high touchdown dependency is absolutely phenomenal. That means you're putting him into the lineup, you're getting your points week in and week out, and then the weeks that he does end up getting into the end zone, he's the player that pushes you over the edge. He's the one that pushes you into that win category. And then if you're lucky enough to have another guy on your roster do the same thing, you won your week, let's move on. I do think that Allen continues to be a wide receiver 1, and I'm extremely comfortable having him as my number 1 wide receiver on my team. And if he's anything less than that, as a wide receiver 2, you're golden. You're great. Moving on, we've got CeeDee Lamb getting drafted at wide receiver 10. Wide receiver 10, going off the board as 27, finishing the year last year as wide receiver 22. Obviously, we saw a terrible year for the Cowboys once Dak Prescott went down. He did get about 4.5 weeks with Dak Prescott as quarterback and looked pretty decent. But what was really more impressive for me was the fact that between weeks 6 and 17, when Dak Prescott was down, CeeDee Lamb was still finishing as wide receiver 32. He wasn't getting the greatest throws to his way. They weren't getting a lot of passing touchdowns for the Cowboys in the season. So that just means that when you have competent quarterback back, you're going to be getting even more return. Even without Dak Prescott, like I was saying, wide receiver 32, and that was averaging 10 points per game, which gives you that consistency factor. And he's in that perfect position to take a step forward this year, and has been really showing out so far in camp, making really spectacular catches, as well as Dak Prescott coming and looking pretty great so far. He looks to be the team's number 1 wide receiver, with Amari Cooper lining up on the opposite side, or at least that 1A, 1B type where we can see guys, other teams find really good fantasy relevance like Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett. Both guys finding great value in a high-scoring offense. He's going to be a great pick this year. He's not very comfortable with him as my wide receiver 1, though, just because of the total volume and the fact that, yes, Dak is coming back. And he was so hyped coming into the season last year because of how he started the season the year before. Because of how he started. I just don't think that we're going to be able to count on him week in and week out. And I do think that with him and Amari Cooper, it's going to be who gets the touchdowns and who really is leading that week. Great as my wide receiver 2, but just not as my 1. Moving on, we got Terry McLaurin. Finished as wide receiver 20 last season with 87 catches and 1,100 yards. Last year, the Washington's quarterback situation was absolutely abysmal. Guys like Kyle Allen got 4 weeks. Dwayne Haskins was there, and even Alex Smith for a few of them. They were getting a lot of volume out, which is what helped Terry McLaurin have a pretty good finish last season. But the problem was they weren't getting into the end zone. They threw the ball. They ranked 10th. They had the 10th most completions in the NFL last season, while being ranked 28th in passing touchdowns. It means they were throwing the ball out to get downfield and then letting Antonio Gibson run the ball up, which is nice, which is great. But that doesn't really help your receivers in fantasy. Now, Terry McLaurin does give you, again, that really, really beautiful consistency week in and week out with that boom opportunity if he does get himself into the end zone. Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be quarterback there this year. And as that resident Dolphins fan, obviously I know what he brings to the table, and that's a lot of risky throws that lead to receivers making some big plays. I think Terry McLaurin is going to find his consistency again this year and really break that 4 touchdown mold that he got last year, pushing him possibly up to 8, which would push him well into a wide receiver 1 category. He did have that consistency last year, finishing 8 weeks as a wide receiver 2 or better. And if we do get past those 4 touchdowns, you're going to find yourself as a top-end wide receiver. He is another guy that I'm really comfortable having as my wide receiver 1. and even happier if he falls to me as a wide receiver too. Next guy on is Allen Robinson. He can be an absolute monster, and he's been doing a really great job in Chicago the past couple of years since getting there. Obviously, we're expecting Fields to take over in Chicago, which should help him. Last year, Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky were both able to move the ball downfield enough for Allen Robinson to have a great season, but he hasn't had the best play. Now, if he can get someone that can, throw him the ball incredibly well, the guy's already been averaging nearly 10 targets a game throughout his career in Chicago. And if you can get better, more quality targets there that can lead to more plays downfield, Allen Robinson's going to be someone that can finally break into that top 5 wide receiver category. But I do think his ceiling is capped until Fields gets in. And as of right now, we do know that Andy Dalton is going to be starting week 1, which, it's not terrible, but we know what he did when he was at his time in Dallas last season, and I'm not sure we can expect much better coming in from that. Allen's going to be someone who is not a touchdown-dependent wide receiver, meaning that you're going to get that consistency week in and week out, making him a really comfortable wide receiver 1 on your team, going at a good spot for him. Moving on to number 30, we've got Amari Cooper, who's actually being drafted 3 spots behind his teammate CeeDee Lamb. Even though he finishes the team's number 1 wide receiver, finishes wide receiver 13 last year and wide receiver 10 the year before that, and has been more and more consistent ever since getting away from Oakland, where he really earned the name of being a flash. He's there one week, he's not there the next. He's booming one week and busting the next. Coming into Dallas, he's been very, very consistent, and was wide receiver 22 in those weeks when Dak Prescott was down between weeks 6 and 17, averaging 11 points per game. In that same time period, CeeDee Lamb was going as wide receiver 32, while Amari Cooper still had 2 weeks as top 10 receiver with that terrible quarterback play. I do think that he's going to be a really dominant force in fantasy this year. He's going to be someone that's going to be getting those targets very consecutively. And like I was mentioning earlier with CeeDee Lamb, I think both of them are going to be great top-end receivers, but I do think that they cap each other. They are going to be getting over 100 targets apiece. They're not going to be competing for targets, but they are going to be competing for touchdowns. In that situation, especially with Ezekiel Elliott possibly on one of the bounce-back years, I'm not sure how many total touchdowns are going to come in, and I'm not sure which one of these guys are going to be more touchdown dependent. Realistically, when it comes into drafting them, if I had to pick between the two, I'm taking CeeDee Lamb. I think the upside on him is much higher, but I do like the fact that Amari Cooper does feel somewhat safe for me. Again, not going to have to be able to trust him every week, which is why I'm not taking him as a wide receiver 1 on my team, but I'm really, really happy to be grabbing him as a wide receiver 2. But if I'm drafting earlier and I still have some of the guys above him, I might take a shot on them before I grab even CeeDee Lamb. And at the end of the episode, I'll give you guys a list of how I would take these guys in order. Going on to number 31, we've got DeAndre Swift. And moving into the league season, I was really pumped for him. I thought he was going to be moving into a great role, especially with Jared Goff coming in, taking away some of that passing volume and giving him more rushing opportunities. And last year, it was a really crowded backfield with guys like Adrian Peterson coming in, Kerryon Johnson even taking some touches away. And then as well as the Lions losing all their pass catchers as well, and Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones. I think that DeAndre Swift is going to be someone that they're going to have to rely on a lot. When he did start receiving a majority of the timeshare in the backfield from Detroit from weeks 14 and on, he was finishing as running back 15 and did have a week where he finished as running back 6. He did finish as a top 10 running back 3 times last season, and he should continue to see that pass-catching upside, even though Jamal Williams is brought into that offense. Now, we do know that Jamal Williams is a very, very competent running back. He can be extremely efficient and had weeks last season where he finished above Aaron Jones. But Aaron Jones was still the better guy there and was finishing, especially in fantasy, as a top 12 running back consecutively and consistently. Now, Aaron Jones, great. I think DeAndre Swift is almost as good. I think Swift's going to be going into an opportunity this year where he's going to be seeing 5 to 7 targets per game, as well as getting those 10 carries, 10 to 15 carries, some games even breaking into those 20s. And I think that's going to lead to 200 carries this year and up to 70 targets, especially in a full 17 weeks. Last year when he was averaging 4.5 yards per carry, you're looking at someone that could possibly get 900 to 1,000 yards, which would be a first for a Detroit running back in years. Now, his touchdown upside was incredible last year, 114 carries, finding the end zone 8 times. Now, if Williams does come in and he ends up losing some of those touchdowns, oh well. With increased volume, I think that if Williams comes in and takes a 40% of the backfield, I think that Swift is going to be absolutely fine, and finishing great is someone that you're going to be picking up as running back 15, especially with that pass catching. Coming in at number 32, we've got J.K. Dobbins. Now, we did have the departure of Mark Ingram in Baltimore this year, and so we're looking for J.K. to take over that role at least. Gus Edwards is still going to be there, but he shouldn't be taking over too much. Gus should be in there for relief as well as a change of pace back. Having his own role, but still leading JK an opportunity to be an absolute stud this year. He was really popping off last season, Dobbins averaging 6 yards per carry, as well as scoring 9 touchdowns in only 134 carries. In that offense, it's going to make him a really vital player. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's got his own rushing ability, and with that, it leads a lot of opportunity to give a fake, letting the running back run it up the middle while he runs outside, pulling the defense with him, and we're going to be seeing a lot of that. The Ravens did spend a lot of draft capital on receivers in this offseason, draft capital as well as monetary capital, spending on free agent Sammy Watkins and drafting Rashad Bateman. I don't think it's going to take too much away from the upside of the running backs in this room, especially with Mark Ingram gone. If JK can take over 40% of that snap share and continue to be half as efficient as he was, maybe not half, but still averaged 4.5 yards per carry when he was on for 6 before that, we should see JK being able to go for over 1,200 yards next season, balling out, even with 9 touchdowns, no upside, no positive regression there, and you're still looking at a top 6 running back. JK finishes running back 23 on only 155 total touches last year, and so the total upside, total volume going up is only going to lead to him being even more and more balling, being RB6 from weeks 11 through 17 and not even playing in week 12. I do think that we're going to expect to see a lot of greatness from him. Now, moving on to a guy that I've been all over the place. I'm going over Mike Evans, wide receiver from Tampa Bay, going at number 33 overall right now, being drafted as the wide receiver 14. Now, this guy's obviously, like I said, I've been all over the place with him. He's someone that I've been super into. Last year, I wrote an article about him where I told you not to draft him because I just didn't like what he was doing, and I thought Chris Godwin was going to take the step forward. I wasn't very wrong personally. He did end up finding himself as a top 10 wide receiver last year, going for over 1,000 yards and 13 touchdowns. Now, that's the problem for me there. On only 1,000 yards, the guy got 13 touchdowns. It's a very, very high margin. His touchdown total made up for 30% of his total fantasy points last season, and a lot of those touchdowns being the only reason that he scored over 10 points in that week. Now, even if Mike Evans continues to be this guy, I just don't know if those touchdowns could be expected week in and week out. That incredible touchdown dependency means that if Tom Brady decides to not give it to him in that end zone, you replacing him because you drafted him in the middle of the 3rd round to be a wide receiver 1 or possibly your first wide receiver 2, you're playing him week in and week out. You feel obligated to, and because of that, you're going to find weeks where you're not getting any points because the guy's only getting 2 targets. Now, last season, Antonio Brown didn't come in until week 9. And from that point on, I think that Antonio Brown's going to be getting even more work in this offense this season, having a full offseason to work with the team. I just don't like the value of Mike Evans at this point. Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown, both guys that are almost as talented, if not more in some aspects. Going much later in this draft, Chris Godwin coming in the 4th round, and Antonio Brown, depending on your drafts, going somewhere between the 7th and 9th round. I think you just move on and take some other guys off this list before you spend up and grab Mike Evans. I do think that he is someone that could give you value, but I just don't think that the risk reward is going to be worth it, and I'm not comfortable taking him in any of my drafts. Now, someone that I am grabbing in almost all of my drafts when I see him is actually going to be Robert Woods. He has jumped up recently, especially after the Cam Akers news, because of the obvious passing up, the upside that's going to be going to the passing game now that Cam Akers is gone. But he's getting grifted an incredible quarterback this year with Matt Stafford, and it's looking to be an incredible year. Last year, Jared Goff was able to have Robert Woods as the wide receiver, as 2 weeks as the wide receiver 3, and 8 weeks as above a wide receiver 28. And he's had his 3rd consecutive year with over 85 catches. And what kept him down last year is, again, those touchdowns. He hasn't been a guy that's been a very touchdown-dependent receiver. And last year they were working with a three-headed running back room with Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, and Malcolm Brown. Now, the overall touchdown upside with Matt Stafford coming in there goes up exponentially, in my opinion. Not Robert Woods is someone that hasn't gone for over 6 touchdowns in the past 3 years while still finding himself as a top-end fantasy wide receiver. And with Matt Stafford there, it's very reasonable to expect him to take those 6 touchdowns and possibly just push him up to 8, which easily will push him up into a top one, a number 1 wide receiver this year. And I think that the total yards and everything. Matt Stafford's got someone that's been very, very good at that deep ball, and Robert Woods is someone that has the ability to get away from that corner and downfield very well. He showed last season that he's very good in the open field as well as just making big plays. And when you got good energy, I think Robert Woods is someone that's one of the last guys that I'm super comfortable with as my wide receiver 1 this year. Prefer him as my wide receiver 2, but if I have him as my wide receiver 1, I'm not mad. Now, if you have this guy, you're not mad. You're not mad at all. We've got Patrick Mahomes going as quarterback 1, drafted at the end of the 3rd round currently at pick 35 overall. We all know Patrick Mahomes. He's got a big arm, big plays, 38 touchdowns in only 15 games last season. He's thrown for over 4,000 yards the past 3 years, 4,500 yards last year, 5,000 yards the year before that. 50 touchdowns in 2018. Now, Mahomes does bring an incredible amount of safety to your roster. If you have him, you're putting him in every week, and you are getting great numbers. The weeks where he blows up, he's giving you 50-plus points in fantasy leagues unless you do bonuses in which he's giving you more. But with that draft capital, you're giving up a lot. I mean, there was guys last season like Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, and Aaron Rodgers who are finishing on a more consistent high-end weekly basis. Last year, Patrick Mahomes only finished as a top 5 quarterback 5 times, while Aaron Rodgers, Kyler Murray, and Josh Allen both finished as a top 5 8. And you can grab all of these guys rounds later than you're grabbing Patrick Mahomes. Now, if you are going into a strategy where you are taking a quarterback early, then yes, you're gonna want to take Patrick Mahomes. If you're in a strategy where you're avoiding a certain position, like a no RB strategy, or if you're in a super flex league, Patrick Mahomes is going to be an absolute stud for you. He's going to be putting up points, but I don't recommend taking the first quarterback off the board and being the guy that grabs him, just because of the other people that you're going to be missing out on. Now, if he falls into the later rounds, in the 4th round, if he falls into the 5th, grab him instantly. No reason at that point not to take him. Now, going at number 36 and last one in the 3rd round, it's going to be Julio Jones. It's almost weird seeing him this late in the draft. Some people feel like he should be way higher, and you're used to seeing him way higher. But he's going to be coming into this Tennessee offense, and it's going to be the first time he's out of Atlanta. Been playing with Matt Ryan for years and years, who's someone who's been throwing the ball over 600 times a season. And last year, Ryan Tannehill only threw the ball for 480 times. Now, Tennessee does have the most vacated targets out of the NFL this year, but I just don't know what exactly that's going to mean for Julio there. He's going at wide receiver 16 right now, so that kind of scares me. That means he's going as your wide receiver 2, or possibly you're grabbing him, and you better not be grabbing him as your wide receiver 1. He missed a handful of games last season. Prior to that, he's been very, very healthy, so I don't know why there's so much against him for that. But the problem for me is the amount of volume decrease that's going to be going on in the offense around him. Like I said, last year, and for the past few years, Matt Ryan's thrown the ball 600 times. Last year, Ryan Tannehill only threw the ball for 480 times. And that's kind of what you're going to be getting from Tannehill. He's not a 600 passing attempts per game guy in Tennessee. Now, there's going to be some Dolphins fans out there who are going to say, hey, we remember a time in Miami when Tannehill was throwing 550 times a season and was airing the ball out. But that's not Tennessee. Marcus Mariota at the time, when Tannehill wasn't there, was still only throwing the ball 480 times a year. Since Derrick Henry's ran the ball for over 1,000 yards 3 years ago, the team hasn't thrown the ball for 500 or more times a year. And in an offense that's like that, it's not going to leave Julio a lot of work. But it is going to help A.J. Brown, in my opinion. And in that, I do think that Julio is going to have boom games. I think he's a great grab in best ball. I think that if you're grabbing him as your wide receiver 2 or 3, and he falls to you, it's going to be great. On a per game basis, I think you're going to get a lot from him. I just don't know if you're going to be able to consistently rely on him, but I do think he makes a great supplementary receiver on your team with that extreme high end upside. So, guys, that's going to leave me to finish up the end of the third round breakdown. These are going to be all of your guys you can grab. Hope you like that. Just like I said, I'm going to be giving you guys my rundown about my order I would be drafting you guys in. And that's going to be Keenan Allen at 25, George Kittle at 26, Terry McLaurin at 27, Allen Robinson at 28, Robert Woods at 29, CeeDee Lamb at 30, DeAndre Swift at 31, Amari Cooper at 32, J.K. Dobbins going at 33, Julio Jones at 34, Mike Evans, I'll take him at 35, and then Patrick Mahomes. Put him at the last just because I'm not really happy about drafting him so early in a draft and taking that early quarterback. But again, guys, that is the third round breakdown. Make sure to like and subscribe again to the YouTube channel. Get yourself a spot in the Fantasy Taps Listener League, as well as being a member of the Discord channel. And then stay tuned again. Mike will be giving you guys the round 4 breakdown coming out really soon. And hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you so much for tuning in again today, and we will see you again soon. Bye.